What if I told you that the biggest polar bear to ever exist may not be alive today, but buried beneath the streets of London? Not Alaska, not the Arctic, London. Around 70,000 years ago, a mysterious bear roamed what is now England. If the fossil discovered there really belonged to a polar bear, then this animal would have dwarfed even the largest modern polar bears. Scientists gave it an intimidating name, Ursus Maritimus Tyrannus, the tyrant polar bear. But there's one problem. Many researchers believe this giant never existed at all. Some argue the fossil belonged to an enormous brown bear instead. Others insist it was evidence of a lost giant polar bear unlike anything we've ever seen. And after more than half a century, the debate is still far from settled. So, who was this prehistoric giant? Was it truly the largest polar bear in history, or one of the biggest scientific misidentifications ever made? Let's travel back 70,000 years and uncover the mystery of the tyrant polar bear. The largest polar bear that ever lived? The mystery of Ursus Maritimus Tyrannus. What if the largest polar bear in history wasn't living in the Arctic, but in ancient England? It sounds impossible. Today, polar bears are the undisputed kings of the Arctic, capable of growing larger than any other living bear. But according to one controversial fossil discovery, there may have once been a polar bear so enormous that it made modern giants look small. Scientists even gave it a terrifying name, Ursus Maritimus Tyrannus, the tyrant polar bear. But here's the twist. Some researchers believe this animal never existed. They argue the fossil belonged to an unusually massive brown bear, not a polar bear at all. So who is right? To answer that question, we need to go back nearly 70,000 years, to a time when mammoths, giant deer, and Ice Age predators roamed Europe. The story begins in London. During railway construction near Kew Bridge, workers uncovered a strange fossil unlike anything they had seen before. It was later sent to the Natural History Museum, where scientists began examining it. The fossil wasn't a complete skeleton. It was only part of an ulna, one of the two bones in the forearm. Normally, a single bone isn't enough to make headlines. But this one was different. It was unbelievably large. In 1964, Finnish paleontologist Björn Curtin carefully studied the fossil and published his findings in a paper titled The Evolution of the Polar Bear. His conclusion shocked the scientific world. According to Curtin, the bone didn't belong to a brown bear. It belonged to a giant polar bear unlike any ever discovered. Even more surprising, the fossil wasn't fully grown. The end of the bone was still missing, meaning the animal had not yet reached adulthood. After comparing it with modern polar bear skeletons, Curtin estimated the complete ulna would have measured at least 485 millimeters, over 19 inches long. That may not sound extraordinary at first, until you compare it with modern bears. Even the largest known brown bears rarely have an ulna longer than about 380 millimeters. This fossil was dramatically larger. To Curtin, the evidence seemed clear. No known brown bear, cave bear, or any other bear species could easily explain a forearm bone of this size. If he was correct, then Earth had once been home to the largest polar bear ever known. But size wasn't his only argument. The shape of the bone also caught his attention. One particular feature, the hooked upper end of the ulna, looked far more like a polar bear than a brown bear. In modern brown bears, this area is usually rounded. In polar bears, it's more elongated and pointed. Despite the damage, the fossil appeared to match the polar bear pattern remarkably well. Everything seemed to support the idea of a giant prehistoric polar bear. But then one question changed everything. What was a polar bear doing in London? The mystery deepens. At first, the evidence seemed convincing. The fossil was enormous. Its shape closely resembled that of a polar bear. Everything pointed toward the existence of a giant Ice Age predator. But then scientists noticed one major problem: the location. The fossil had been discovered near London, hundreds of miles south of the Arctic. Even during the Ice Age, that raised serious questions. Could a true polar bear really have lived that far south? The mystery became even stranger when researchers examined the other animal fossils found at the same site. Among them were hippopotamuses, straight-tusked elephants, Red deer, Irish elk, aurochs, and bison. Think about that for a moment. Hippos and elephants are animals we associate with much warmer environments.